words of my lips and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And I'm going to ask you to think about that person closest to you. It could be a father, a mother, a spouse, a brother or a sister, a son or a daughter. And I want you to imagine them here at church. Maybe at a service, maybe at a Bible study, maybe at a Curcio grouping. I want you to think about how it would feel if they were shot and killed. And then I want you to think about what happens when you see the person who did it. I know most of us just want to be happy. We just want to be peaceful. We retire to Florida, find a nice community, perhaps with a gate on it. We just want to relax. And yet, the world keeps crashing in. Now, in the wake of the tragedy of 9 people being shot and killed at a Bible study in South Carolina, everyone has jumped up and said, oh, I know what the problem is, and I know what the fix is. We need this law or that law. We need this, we need all sorts of different things. But I think there's only one thing that is needful. But I'll come back to that. You probably didn't come here wanting to hear about this. I didn't come here wanting to preach about it. I have David and Goliath, one of my favorite stories in the Bible. David, one of my favorite characters. And yet we need to talk about this. So first, what are the problems? If we look at this situation, there are 3 very obvious problems to me. There are many, many more. But for me, first, there's the issue of racism. It continues and maybe forever will be a problem in this country. I didn't know it was a problem. Not initially. I blame my parents. Their best friends happen to be black. When my dad died, Jeff and Mamie were there. When Jeff died, my mom, my brother, and I were there. Now I had to learn about it. The learning became really advanced in the riots in Detroit. And then as life went on, and I saw it more and more in places I never expected to see it. In my church, among my parishioners. It's not something that we can pretend doesn't exist. We need to always be conscious of our participation in it. When an inappropriate joke is made, do we laugh politely so as not to offend the teller? even though what has just been said is so offensive? Do we not call people on what is obvious, a preconceived notion on their part, based on pigment? I have two skin diseases. One turns my skin red, the other makes it whiter than white. It is inconceivable to me that somehow that matters. And yet it does. In the minds and the hearts of many. But it can't in this church. The second problem is mental illness. When, even before I was a priest, there was a thing called a community youth worker. I was a walking resource guide, a supportive friend to high schoolers who were in trouble. And it was the first time I'd run into someone who cuts themselves. As time went on, bipolar, paranoid schizophrenic, PTSD, severe depression. And as I went on, it became harder and harder for me to help these people because as a society, we continue to turn our backs on them. We have withdrawn most medical facilities where they might be safe. We have withdrawn the ability for them to get the kind of help and even in some cases the medications they need because we think it's not cost effective. I have had friends, I have had colleagues, I've had staff members, and I have had parishioners who have suffered from all sorts of mental disease. And the amazing thing to me is the prejudice that is held against them. If somebody contracts cancer, we feel sorry. If somebody has pneumonia, we see that they get treatment. But for the majority of us, we find out somebody has a mental illness, we want to stay away. And they need our love, our care, and our compassion. They also need boundaries sometimes. And some of the hardest things I've had to do is to take someone out of a ministry to protect other people. That said, understand, most people who suffer from mental illness are not dangerous. And yet the prisons are now full. We've closed the hospitals and opened more prisons. And if you ask most wardens, they will tell you that they have more mentally ill people than they do true criminals. Finally, it's our youth. We don't care about our kids. Not the way we used to. Paul Stokey, Peter, Paul, and Mary, some of you are old enough to remember those guys. He made an observation once. He was talking about magazines. He said, in the 50s we had Life, and Life was everything and everybody. He says in the 60s we had People. It wasn't everything, but it was everybody. He says in the 70s we had Us. And then in the 80s we had Self. As a society, we have become increasingly narcissistic. It's about what feeds our egos, our needs, our wants, our desires. And to heck with the consequences on society. In the 50s, married couples would often gut it out if things weren't going well for the sake of the children. Except where one parent was addicted or abusive, I have never met a child who says, yeah, I wish my parents had. But it's not about the kids. It's about what we want. Every child deserves a father and a mother. End of story. Every child deserves parents that have time for them. When I was very young, apparently we were poor. I didn't know. But our house was a home. So I really was going to preach on the lessons today. But I got this. I had a youth minister named Brian and his wife, Holly. Brian happens to be black. Holly happens to be white. And she posted this on Facebook after the shootings. She says this: I just spent the past several minutes writing an angry rant about what has happened in South Carolina and about racism in America. Then I deleted it. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm sad. Yes, I'm heartsick. And you know what else? I'm scared. I have two beautiful little girls downstairs who might be mixed, but to most of society that makes them black and it makes them a target to some people. I have a husband whose skin color could get him killed, and I think I have every right to be terrified. And instead of my rant, which serves no purpose except to vent my frustrations, I will simply pray. I pray for the 9 people who lost their lives. I am praying for their families, friends, church, and community. I'm praying for all those who are targeted, picked on, and persecuted because of the color of their skin, religion, sexuality, or gender. I am praying for people whose hearts are so small and whose minds are even smaller that they can't see the beauty in all people. I am praying for healing in our nation and for all of us. I pray that our lives never be touched by this kind of hate, tragedy, violence, and sorrow. I pray that our eyes, minds, and hearts be open to loving each person as the Lord intended us to do. Amen. The answer is not a bunch of new laws. The answer is the advancement of God's kingdom. I want you to memorize a verse. It's really easy. Romans 12:21, 1-2-2-1. Even if you don't memorize the verse, now you know how to get to it. Paul says this: do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by good. Holly's fears can be calmed by the power of Jesus, just as he calmed the storm. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. We will not be overcome by evil, but will overcome evil with good. I ask you to visualize the person who did this heinous thing. I want you to know that the families and friends of the 9 victims saw him 2 days later in court. And they forgave him. Each one stood up. Baltimore, one man is shot down in the street. Riots erupt. In South Carolina, 9 people are murdered in a church. And forgiveness breaks out. We will not be overcome by evil, but we will overcome evil with good.